Good morning. I'm just looking who all is there online. Good morning to you too. We're animals. I don't know if that's a surprising statement. Anyway, that's how I see it. And what I mean by that is we're bodies. It's not like we are, again, it's just my view. It's not like we are something other than the body and that other than the body thing has a body. And I think the body becomes problematic for us, or a subject of our study, it's because, and I'm aware that I'm immensely simplifying, but just to find a way to speak, right? It's like, because pain and pleasure come and go in the medium of the body. And much of our behavior and our habits is driven by this coming and going of pain and pleasure. I don't mean just the really intense stuff, like, you cut yourself and you have this incredible pain, or, you have even greater physical trauma to the body. We can imagine, broken limbs, injured organs, and so forth. And also not just the highlights of our pleasure, the great fun or deep pleasures that we experience from certain experiences. I just mean, the whole spectrum. You get up in the morning and you don't feel great. Like that, that also belongs to this coming and going of pain and pleasure, or we could say pleasant and unpleasant sensations. Oh, you feel great, but it's all very temporary. All of it is very temporary too. So it becomes clear upon examination that we can't base our happiness on the coming and going of pleasant and unpleasant sensations. This is a basic insight of Buddhist wisdom and practice. And one reason we can't really base our happiness on that is because it's not in our control. But it's interesting. It's enough in our control, right? There's a certain degree of control that we have over how we feel, that we keep trying to optimize it. And so even if you have clarity about that, you can't really base your happiness on this pain-pleasure economy of the body, it's like, you probably keep trying anyway. Because we do have some influence and control, and so we try to exercise it. And it's like a lot of energy goes into that. Yeah. In the history of Western philosophy, thought, we could also say wisdom, philosophy being the love of wisdom. That's what the word means originally. There's a great emphasis on developing the, as we would say in our modern language, the rational mind. And I think one way we can just roughly interpret this excitement about developing the rational mind is that it promises some distance from the whims of the body. And so it's maybe that the promise, we could spell it out as we can learn to have enough distance from how we feel, and we can base our behavior on rational thought that is based in clear-eyed observation, science, logic, So it becomes a kind of demand for us as rational beings that we have reasons for our actions. And if we don't have any reasons, then it's like we say, oh, that's just, we're acting impulsively or instinctively like animals. And rationality becomes kind of the hallmark of being human. I mean, in this development of, I think, Western culture. And if you go too far with this investment in rational thought, you end up with a condition that I think our culture is completely embedded in, and you can talk about it in various ways, but let's call it a body-mind dualism, where the body becomes the object of rational thought and, we hope, control. Right? And when you take this too far, then you are left with a feeling of, I don't know if you do it. Let me talk about myself. Or say one can be left with a sense of alienation and feeling divided against oneself. It's like the body becomes an object for the rational mind to analyze, to govern. Yeah, can you follow that? I think it's important to clarify this condition as a cultural condition, not as a personal failure, although personally we get really involved in this cultural conditioning. But it does have a deep effect on us as human beings. Like I think this sense of alienation or not being quite ourselves is something we carry as individual people. We can't just externalize that. Well, it's the culture's fault and I'm free of that. No, it's like it really deeply affects me. So if you have a statement in Zen like body and mind are not two, right? If you just read it as a statement, it's like, well, it's just something else somebody's saying. But we have to let it speak to this cultural condition that we bear personally and live personally, and say, like, what does this mean? Like, how do we actualize in our own lived experience that the body and the mind are not two? the reason we don't say they're one is that we simply have the experience that body and mind can be separated. That is, the history of Western culture shows that they can be separated, and you can identify with the rational mind and treat the body just as this nuisance or appendix. So they can be separated, but ultimately they're not. And I think the reason we have to conclude that ultimately they can't is because if we do enter into this state of two-ness, separation, dualism, that feels like alienation, or that in a Western psychological jargon would be called dissociation. You're dissociated means the association between body and mind is separated. We experience the effect of it, and the fact that we are experiencing the effect of it means ultimately body and mind are not separated, because when we try to separate them, it comes with a price. That is, again, experienced actually through the body. You just feel kind of flat, or your life doesn't have depth, or you know. Now, if you've listened to me before, I put a great emphasis on the body. One way you can understand that is that it's, as Westerners, I'm just speaking from within Western culture because I have no lived experience in other cultures, but I assume in our global culture now it's not really limited to the West. There is a task to reassociate the mind with the body. So, in recognizing this need, I'm using the word bodyfulness in the place of what in Buddhism is translated as, in Western Buddhism is translated as mindfulness. Why? Because I think if we are conditioned to inhabit and identify with a rational mind and we practice mindfulness, it can feel like, mindfulness being the intention to bring attention to sensation without thinking about it any further. If you identify with your rational mind and your attention is residing in your head, which, let's be honest, you can ask yourself the simple question, where am I in my body? And I say in our culture, most people would locate themselves in their heads, behind their eyes, between their ears, and so it can have a feeling like you're looking down with the spotlight of your attention. You're looking down at the various targets of mindfulness. You're looking down at your breathing. You're looking down at your body sensations, your heart beat, etc. A practice like the body scan can feel like you are scanning the body from up here, and then you're scanning the body, but you remain in your head. I don't think that's the mindfulness practice that is intended here, really. I remember reading a book on mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. There's so many, I forget which one it was. But in the early days of my practice, and he's speaking about how in mindfulness of breathing, there is I remember him speaking about how there is a way that you can start to feel like the mind observing the breathing and the breathing are not two. And there's various ways to maybe speak about this experience. It's like you enter into a mind in which it feels like breathing is breathing itself. It's not like there's a self or agent that is doing the breathing. The breathing is breathing itself, and so it feels like the sensations of breathing, which is what we experience, are noticed. But this noticing of the sensations of breathing doesn't create a division. This, you could say, is bodyfulness. So I'm not saying that mindfulness is inherently a flaw or something. I'm just using the word bodyfulness to guard against a kind of practice of mindfulness that is just this kind of scanning that maintains separation. I think we should just be clear about that. So the location where you locate yourself can change. We can have a sense of being located in the head, and this idea. I mean, the common Western method of suicide is to shoot yourself in the head, and I think that has to do with trying to kill the location of the self. There's different ways to kill yourself. And in Japanese culture, this ritual disembowelment, suicide by, called harakiri, which literally means to cut the gut, to cut the belly. I think it has to do with, you can locate yourself in your belly and feel that as the location of the self, the primary location of the self, and not the head. This hara, this belly, can be the center of where you locate your feeling of being alive. But I think it's just the center. It's really all over the body. And I'll get into this. Well, yeah. And it can be even wider than the body. It can be the whole sphere of experience where we are locating ourselves. But in order to locate yourself differently, you kind of have to see it as a task to not locate yourself in your head. It's too narrow. Even though, and again, it's like it's a big achievement to develop rationality, but to be identified with it is a problem. So why is this, I want to ask today this question of why this practice of bodyfulness with these extensions that I've alluded to, why is it so important? Why do I think it's important? Why might it be important to you, for you? Well, let me start with one aspect here. There's a kind of consensus among Buddhist practitioners that the the time in which we can actually make, in which transformation can happen is now. Could make arguments about this, but I just assume that you that you accept this already, that being present is important. Well, from our Western rational point of view, time is just a linearity of moments, and a now is a ungraspably small fraction of time. It's like as soon as you look at this now, it's like gone, because there's another now. So I just want to point you to this interesting question. It's like, how do you locate yourself in the now if it's this fleeting? It seems completely impossible to me. It should not be possible to be present, because it's like it's gone already. So you just keep locating yourself in this like race of present moments. But the solution to this question is actually through the body, because we have to find the now as a here. We have to turn the now into a here. And the way you turn the now into a here is by locating yourself in your body. Because the body is always here. The mind can be elsewhere. The mind can be in the past, as you know, and it can be in the future, and think about, what should happen in the future. The body can only reside and be located in the here. And this here has spatial qualities. So when you bring attention in your mindful or bodyful practice, if you bring attention to breathing, you are establishing a here. Because this breathing occurs here. And when you attend to body sensations in general, you create a here. You create the here of the space of the body as it is felt. And now we can ask ourselves, what are the boundaries of this here? Clearly, in our conventional way of speaking, here is in opposition to there. So it's here and it's there. You are there, I am here. When you have a Zen phrase like no here or there, what do you do with that? Something like that. How do you practice it? You're just spinning it around in your mind? You're like, oh, no here, no there. Oh, what does that mean? I think the only way to make sense of such a question is like finding a way to locate yourself in the body as this here, and ask yourself whether the there is established as an opposition to this here. So if I just look into my field of vision, what prevents me from treating this field of vision that is my sphere of visual experience? Like, what prevents me from pouring my now, bodily attention into this sphere, into this field of vision as part of the here. All of this is here. So then, if I take this whole room as the new here, maybe the cars are out there. But again, if you include your field of hearing into the here, then the cars are traveling in this here space. And if you want to, for a moment right now, go into a meditative space, and you bring, you spread out your vision, you make your eyes soft, you bring attention to your breathing, you bring your attention to the field of hearing. My voice, in our case, the cars here in this space. I don't know how it is for you and those of you who are on Zoom. It's like the cars are traveling directly through this space of attention that I'm establishing. It's like what makes me say that they are out there. This is really worth playing with. It dissolves not just a separation between mind and body, it dissolves the separation between this newly integrated body and mind and what we call the world, because all of it is happening in our own sphere of experience, or as I like to say, in our own field of mind. Mind here isn't mind in opposition to body. Mind here is the body-mind, the field of our body-mind, our mind-body. Without returning to the sensations of the body and using them to establish a new here and expanding that here into this field of experience, I don't see how you can practice with this separation that I think we all know about between mind and body and world. It takes, and in the language becomes so cumbersome because the enactment of it is a very simple, straightforward thing to do if once you know what it points to. But I think it's true that the now is a place where you can practice when it turns into a here, and then it becomes clear that that's why these two words are being used together. It's like it's a here and now. The now becomes a here, and the here turns the now into something very different. It's not a moment that just disappears. It's actually it becomes an eternal moment because that now is always here. Eternal, not as everlasting. I don't make metaphysical statements like that. I'm not saying like, the now is everlasting, but it's all in our experience. It's always there. So, a second point I want to make about why is bodyfulness as a practice important is because it becomes a task in our practice to sustain our ability to locate ourselves or reside within this here and now. This is what you could call samadhi. Sometimes I just sort of shorthand, I said samadhi is the mind concentrated on itself. But this is so fraught with misunderstandings, potential misunderstandings, the mind concentrated on itself. Well, if you have reduced the mind to a rational mind, and the mind concentrating on itself, well, that's clearly not samadhi. And also, concentration for us often means a kind of focused concentration. But this concentration that Buddhism talks about is a spread out attentional presence. It's like when the mind can reside in this wide field of the here, that's samadhi. And it's like when you reside there, it kind of dries up thought. It's like thought doesn't have much to say in this. It's not possible to think your way to this place. This is why meditation is important. Because it's not like you can just... Well, I think, actually, you can think yourself a little bit to that place. Like, I'm hoping right now to think you to that place a little bit. I'm also trying to establish myself in this feeling so that you can get sort of like, get the feeling of it, but so this residing in the field of mind is, we could say samadhi if it is sustained. In order to sustain it, you kind of need to establish a new continuity that is different from the thinking mind, from the discursive mind. It's like the continuity of breath can keep us there. But also the continuity of just locating yourself in your body can keep you there, because if you sort of locate yourself in your hara, or Japanese in this point called the tanden, or Chinese the dantin, if you can locate yourself there, it can become a new continuity. It's like, that's what I am, rather than my stream of thinking. Or you expand that center into the field and say, like, that's what I am. The entire sphere of experience. Energetic practices, and by energy I mean flow of sensation. The flow of sensations is what I call energy right now, so that it's not some woo-woo thing, that's mysterious. Maybe more can be said about it, but that's what I call the energetic dimension of our body, is the flow of sensation. And if our energetic body is imbalanced, it's difficult to reside in it. And you could say, there are dimensions of flow, up and down, front and back, left and right, inside and outside. And these directions of flow, there's value to balance them so that you can reside with some balance, I guess, some equanimity in the sphere of experience. You don't have to contract away from it because it's intolerable what's happening to you. So I subsume that this energetic dimension under the practice of bodyfulness right now. Okay, a third point would be, we talk about compassion in Buddhism. You can interpret compassion as being nice to people, and that's certainly not a bad thing. But I don't think that is really compassion. The full picture of compassion. I try to talk about compassion as resonance, and I think there's limits to that metaphor. But bodyfulness, the practice of bodyfulness, affords us to feel in our own bodies what it is like when things happen in the world, or when things happen to other people. It has, like I said, the cars are not, they're not driving out there. They're going directly through your own field of experience, and I feel it. It's like if I close my eyes or half close them, it feels like the cars are driving directly through my sphere of attention. Well, it is like that with whatever happens. It happens directly in your own bodily anchored sphere of experience. And I think this is the real source of compassionate action, because whatever happens we feel that it's not happening separate from us. What the appropriate course of action is from that is another question. I'm offering a seminar next weekend on an appropriate response. That would be that question of how does this resonance that we can't help but experience, how does that translate into appropriate action? Which is a craft. It's not easy to do. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Okay, so here you have three reasons for why bodyfulness might be intertwined, of course, why bodyfulness might be an important way of thinking about our practice of weaving body and mind together, or practicing mindfulness as it's usually called. To wrap this up, there's this saying that I've read other Buddhist authors use, and it's amusing and startling. Chogyam Trungpa supposedly said, enlightenment is like jumping out of an airplane. The bad news is there is no parachute. The good news is there's no ground. So that's amusing, but it's also startling, because it's like, wow, yeah, When I accept that there is no ground, then there doesn't have to be a fear of hitting the ground. So what is this? This is of course just an image, but what is this? This is our situation that he's talking about. This is our human situation. It is characterized by groundlessness. And we can have different relationship to groundlessness. We can have a relationship of fear, then it's bad news. Or we can have a relationship of, I don't know what you want to call it, freedom, when then groundlessness becomes good news. It's like, you can relax. It's groundless. Nothing will ever happen to you. Nothing bad will happen. Even the things that we consider bad, from this point of view, are not bad. Having pain is not bad. Dying is not bad. It's just another experience that is groundless. So I'm bringing this up because the practice of bodyfulness expands into an exploration of groundlessness. How can you see this sphere of experience, this field of mind, how can you see it as a groundless space in which we splash about or fall about, to use the image of the falling out of an airplane? Maybe something I haven't mentioned in the reasons to practice bodyfulness is there's a kind of spiritual pleasure that comes with being located in this field of mind, which is, I like to call, the joy of being alive for no other reason than being alive, which is a better ground for happiness than being, thrown around by pain and pleasure. If you want to call it happiness, I try to avoid it, maybe contentment. Because this field of mind has a feel to it, and it's relaxed, and has a certain kind of heavy feeling to it, like grounded feeling to it. And because it's relaxed and grounded, it can host, the coming and going of pain and pleasure. And so there's a kind of, I don't mean this in a value judgment way, there's a kind of goodness, or like Trungpa called it basic goodness, I think. There's a basic goodness that comes from this aliveness that we can take, that can be joyful in that sense. If you want to use paradoxes, it's a kind of groundless ground, because you can kind of rely on it without ever being able to fixate it into anything. I know many of you have these feelings already, it's like maybe one intention I have with the talk is to, take them seriously and find a way to sustain them. This is not easy, this ability to locate yourself in such a way that it is sustained, or at least something you can always return to when you lose it. Now, our lives are really complicated. All kinds of things happen, but we think they're complicated, when we separate them out into different aspects. You've got to take care of this and that, and this is happening, and then you're like, I have to fix this, and there's a fire that needs to be put out. Now I have these disturbing thoughts. Oh God. So I'm not making fun of it, just a little light, It's our life. And the solution to this is so surprisingly simple. It is so simple. The solution is to just be present with everything that comes up. But when I say something like this, I sound like, it's like snake oil or something. It's crazy to speak like this. Just be present. So it's simple, but it's actually difficult, because it's necessary to discover the now as a here. important to see this here as not limited to this self, as this body, but to expand it into this field of mind or this sphere of experience. And rest there. Learn to rest there, so that everything that comes up can actually come up in a field of relative stability. It's all groundless, we're tumbling around, and yet this now, strangely eternal, it's always there, can provide this much needed stability. So all the problems we face in life start out by, you face them with here. Relaxing into, stabilizing into your already existing sphere of experience, which is, it's not being destroyed by any experience. So I hope, that we can be this clear that, the tasks of our lives don't start to compete with our interest in meditation. It's like, oh, should I meditate or should I do something else? Yeah, well, maybe you have to make that decision. But meditation is just the first, getting a taste of, and then sustaining that feel of the field of mind, or that here-ness, so that everything in our life can be actually approached. All the issues can be dealt with. All the problems can be, faced as a first step. Thank you very much.